Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Panos Korogiannakis, the Dissemination Manager of Destinations, and I welcome all of you in this afternoon's webinar entitled Back to Sustainable Mobility in Times of COVID-19. We will discuss with you this afternoon the strategies for tourist destinations in the 6 small islands. We will have 3 main presentations. One from Claudio Montero, our CIVITAS Destinations project coordinator, that will outline the success stories of the CIVITAS Destinations project. We will have a second presentation combined from Andrea Lorenzini from MemEx with interventions from Alexandra Kershaw from Vectos and Maria Ariblia in the place of Stavroula Tournaki from the Technical University of Crete. They will talk to us about their work and their experience and their research on back to sustainable mobility in times of COVID-19. In other words, we will now go deeper into the impact of COVID-19 on sustainable mobility in our 6 islands. And finally, we will hear from Ulf Sonntag from the Institute für Tourismus that will tell us the impact of COVID-19 and its expected recovery with some emphasis on some statistics specifically from Germany. Finally, we will dedicate the last 10 minutes of our webinar to take your questions and to initiate a discussion between the audience and the panelists. For those that are not familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that we will be more than happy to receive your written questions. If you look at your control panel on the right-hand side of GoToWebinar, you will see there is a place that says questions. If you click on that questions button, a window will open just below, and there you can type your question, and we will, at the end of the webinar, we will address your question to one of the panelists to be able to answer your question or to initiate a dialogue. So I think that with this brief introduction, I would like now to turn the microphone to Claudio Montero from the public transport operator in Madeira called Horarios de Funchal, that will show you the success stories of our project. Claudio.
Hello, Panos. Hello to everyone. So I will briefly introduce. So my role here in this session is to present briefly the, let me only share with you the screen. Okay. Okay, so to briefly introduce the project, the overall presentation of CIVITAS Destination, with some best practices, some lessons we learned during the implementation, and I conclude with some outcomes, some main results of the project. So here, so some data about CIVITAS Destination. So CIVITAS Destination joined 6 islands in Europe, 6 European islands, 2 outermost regions, which are Madeira, the autonomous region of Madeira, and Canary Island, with Funchal and Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, 2 Mediterranean islands, which are Isola d'Elba and Crete, and 2 island states, which are quite relevant in the EU definition, which are Malta and Cyprus. So these 6 islands in a project that was last almost 5 years. So basically touch 1.2 million inhabitants, 6 million, they join together a market of 6 million tourists and develop during this time span 83 mobility measure with a total budget of 20 million. So here are some points that join tourism and mobility. So it's a fact that tourism and mobility are strictly related, no? And the trend of both market, despite the COVID, is continuously rising, continuously with bigger numbers each after years. But this situation raises complex issues regarding negative externalities of both markets. Together with this, an segmented product in tourism make more complex the situation at the local level to manage such different operators, markets. So there is a increasing complexity for local stakeholders, especially municipality, to manage tourism growth. It's another fact, the high dependence of private car, individual mobility option that make life difficult for the small municipalities to manage all these complex situations. There are new trends like ITC, the growing ITC solution, share mobility option, and mobility as a service alternatives and platform. And as a last point that basically is the topic of our meeting today, our webinar, is the health emergency and the need to combine these recent pandemic event together with the EU Green Deal objective, recovery plans, and these big goals that we have to manage together during this complex time. So here I selected 8 points that I believe are particularly relevant. All these points are also described in our last publication of the project, and I will present later. So these 8 points. The first point is the relevance of decision process and data collection to act in touristic mobility. Now, during the project, we discover basically that there are a lot of data available at local level in municipalities that usually are separated. So there are data for touristic people, there are data for mobility guys, data for urban planners. So a simple action like join the databases and joins the information at municipal level can bring your knowledge and your decision to high standard level. Second evidence we discover in the project that seems quite evident, but it's important to remember. Tourists at a local destination prefer to walk. So here there is a table when you have the modal share of each of the 6 places in 6 islands. You can see, so it's quite difficult to compare, but it's easy to see the orange part of this graph on the left. So you see people mainly when arrive at the local destination want to explore the places by foot. And this is something we have to remember quite well when we want to plan mobility at touristic destination. Third point, the role of technological tools that has to, especially in small places like the islands and small cities, has to make simpler the life of tourists and also decision makers. To make an example, this was a platform developed in Elba that in a simple way tried to join in a platform, technological platform, all the mobility offer and all the mobility demand. trying to make a matching together between demand and offer. We like to call this a simplified mobility as a service. Fourth point regarding elder and disabled people. This is a core customer for touristic market in the future. And we need specific attention, especially urban planners and mobility planners, to take care of conflict spots and black spots in our network, as you can see in the first image, and especially take this as an opportunity, as they did, for example, in Retimno. And you can see here an equipment to bring wheelchairs until the sea and make this a chance, so to take this an opportunity to develop new niches of tourists. 5 point, the mobility franchise. We all know Nextbike, Uber, Bolt, Move It. And what happened that small municipalities sometimes has to deal with such brands, and the temptation is to let them make their own business, so to use a copy-paste solution. But this is not a good way to work. In our project, we carefully understood that the perfect way to proceed is to tailor-made such micro-mobilities or sharing mobility solution to what your specific needs. So you have to prepare tailor-made contract that make the franchise work as you want in your mobility plan. 6 point, there is more and more need of vertical integration between touristic and mobility service. I explain quite easily. So below you see the value chain of tourism. There are different services like transportation, accommodation, food and beverage. And in touristic location, mobility needs to join mobility service together with other services that are relevant for tourists, to create add value for a tourist to choose a sustainable mobility option. And this concept is also explained quite well in the book I will present at the end. One of the last point, transport as a part of touristic experience. So usually tourist market consider mobility mobility a service, so a medium to reach a point of the touristic point. For mobility purposes, we need to include value to mobility options. So I make an example like discount packages, integration between services, for example, a museum together with the public transport, or a discount in a restaurant if you travel by bus and you show the ticket. So we have to pass to low intrinsic value as a tourism experience to high touristic value tourism experience. So we have to bring content to our sustainable mobility option. Last point, which is the topic, the core topic in this webinar, so the health at the cornerstone to design the future tourism. So the earthquake of pandemic changed completely. Here I put a slogan used here in Madeira, so protect, restart, and recover. So here to conclude my presentation, not to be too long, so here are some key impact we achieved during the project with the total savings in CO2 and liters of fuel. We tested a lot of solution to, for example, to improve maintenance system, to reduce consumption, with the specific consequence on tourism market. I want to underline a big achievement in our project, that we discovered that during this 5-year project of 20 million project, we was able to collect, to unlock almost the same amount of private and public funds. So project like this, like CIVITAS Destination, with small pilots, proved to be very important to launch the economy, the local economies. So here's some data regarding the pandemic. So the pandemic blocked during 2 years 2 touristic seasons. So in 2020, 2021, and here I pasted some evidences about our evaluation process. So we plan to collect 277 indicators of evaluation. We had to change our approach for evaluation due to the pandemic, changing almost 1/3, so 100 indicators had to change, and 8 indicators was directly related to COVID. So also our project has to change completely due to the COVID outbreak. Last, as I told you, so CIVITAS Destination leave enormous legacies of documents. If you go in civitas.eu project destinations, you can find more than 65 deliverables. We are the project that most published in the site. There are measure evaluation reports. There are technical specification for tenders. So there are a lot of interesting materials. And to conclude this publication, and the editor, our professor Theocharis Soutsos from the University of Crete, a sustainable mobility for island destination, you can find is a Springer, is an open book. There is here a link, and all the references about the 8 points that I explained today, and other interesting topics are here for you to see. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Panos, and thanks to the other panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudio, and thank you for keeping within the time. Without any further delay, again, I just want to repeat for our audience, if you have any questions, you can always type them in the appropriate section of the control panel on your right. But at the moment, I want to pass the microphone to Andrea Lorenzini. Hi, Andrea. Andrea Lorenzini from our destinations partner MemEx, that will also incorporate in his presentation 2 interventions from Vectos and from the Technical University of Crete. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Panos. I hope you can see the screen properly. And indeed, I'm here to present to you this final activity of the destination project, and that deals with the possible strategies for tourist destination and small island in recovery to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is also the reason why we try to call this webinar Back to Sustainable Mobility in Times of COVID-19. So I'm here to present you this new booklet or publication that has been focused mostly on the impact of the pandemic on the destination side, and analyzing both these problems or impact, but also presenting some pathway or recommendation to achieve sustainable mobility goals. And this publication will be soon available on the CIVITAS website, and has been a joint work between MemEx, the University of Crete, and also Vectos, with contribution from other partners, and in particular from the 6 destination island. So just to try to give you an idea about the approach that we have tried to follow with this work, basically we have tried to address 3 main layers. The first one was on policy. So what have been the policy applied in destination site as a response to COVID-19. The second layer was about the transport offer. So how the COVID-19 has impacted on the urban mobility and transportation services. And the third layer was about the behavioral change. So how the user perception on mobility services have changed due to COVID. We developed an in-depth survey conducted in February, April of this year with the destination site that was followed by a one-to-one interviews and discussion. And these activities resulted into 3 different thematic reports that were then fed into this publication or booklet that is back to sustainable mobility in times of COVID-19. So I want to briefly introduce you to this publication. So we start from the introduction, and afterward we have a very concise description of the local destination sites. We then pass through a chapter on what we call these mobility behavior changes due to COVID-19. Then we have a chapter on the impact of the pandemic on the transportation offer, so what was layer number 2. We had then chapter number 5 that deals with policy responses to COVID-19, and Maria afterward would say a few words on that. And then we pass to the chapter 6 that is the opportunity toward the sustainable mobility recovery and enhancement. And clearly there is a concluding session, including a set of 10 key recommendations. So just to start, we have started this task with trying to summarize the context situation in the 6th island. And we in particular tried to focus this analysis on 2 main aspects. The first one is the transportation offer, also including what we could call electric mobility situation. So both in terms of public transportation and mobility services that were available in the sites, and also the e-charging infrastructure available. But the second one was also to try to assess each of the 6 islands in terms of how the transport demand was changed. And for this, we tried to assess both the walking trend, the driving trend, and also the public transportation trend. And here, this is not quite visible, but on the booklet, you will have a look at how the different sites have this trend in these sites have changed. And you can see that there is this curve that was quite similar. There were some common trends across the site, and you can see that there was this first lockdown when there have been a massive reduction in travel, and there was an increase, and then another lockdown, and so forth. So starting from this situation, we then tried to assess what have been the changes to mobility behavior due to COVID-19. And for that, we have tried to assess both what we call the medium-term impact, so how behavior changed after the first lockdown, so in spring and summer of 2020. And then we tried to evaluate what we call this longer-term impact, so travel behavior today with respect to the COVID-19 situation. And for this, we tried to assess 4 main aspects or layers. The first one was the private car, the second was the public transport usage, the third one was the cycling and walking, and the fourth one was the working from home, so what we call smart working, online shopping, and delivery. So this was a specific task that was led by Vectors. So at this stage, I would like to leave the floor to Alexandra, who will say a few words on this task. So Alexandra, if you are with us.
Oh, thank you, Andrea.
Yeah.
So can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. The behavioural changes that we saw during COVID-19 have been a result of regulations and restrictions imposed by governments, but also the human response to the virus, such as fear levels. So as of April 2021, we can see from the private car usage that all sites were reporting traffic levels were returning to pre-COVID levels, and that people were displaying an eagerness to use personal individual modes to stay far away from changes and crowds. For the public transport, we can see that patronage has remained well below pre-pandemic levels in most of the sites. However, we can see an elasticity of demand, such as in Las Palmas, where demand dropped to just 12% during the pandemic, but it was back at 68% by 2021, which shows us hopefully is a good return to sustainable modes as COVID starts to wane. Can I have the next slide, please, Andrea? Thank you. So most of the sites also reported an increase in walking and cycling levels, such as Rethymno, where active travel levels after the first lockdown actually exceeded pre-pandemic rates and also saw cycling rates double. However, for other micromobility services, a reliance on tourists for revenue can give a more fragile business model, as demonstrated by Lime pulling its services from Rethymno. We can compare this to more established bike sharing schemes, such as in Limassol, which saw a good use by local residents continuing through the pandemic, and also in Las Palmas, where the publicly run service saw an increase in users during COVID. These services appear to be more resilient possibly more resilient than privately funded during external influences. ITS services, mobility information points, and other digital services have also been shown to offer increased resilience against external factors which limit people's movements. Next slide, please, Andrea. Thank you. So some primary recommendations. The changes in attitudes and perceptions and habits that we may have seen during lockdown will have an impact on how trips are made in the year ahead. The principal objective is that we do not see the re-emergence of the private car use in urban areas, as this will counter years of sustainable urban mobility plan progress. We want to maintain the local living with more journeys and time being spent in residential areas. Investment and planning guidance should enable increased home working, digital service delivery, and the recreational spaces in order to provide local amenities and reduce unnecessary car trips. Policymakers should also enhance walking and cycling infrastructure so that people continue to be attracted to these modes as a viable alternative for journeys. And finally, micromobility services can offer a vital alternative in times where public transport capacity may be limited and where car use is either discouraged or where ownership is low. So tourist versus residential usage levels and public versus private services should be considered in future micromobility business models. And all in all, we have an opportunity now to redesign the new normal more sustainably in terms of behaviour. So we should take advantage of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexandra, for this flash introduction about the behavioral change. And I'm just now trying to follow on this with what we have assessed in terms of impact of the pandemic on the transportation offer. So again, we try to assess four main aspects about this. The first one was the limit on vehicle capacity, and indeed we have tried to monitor how the public transport capacity was reduced in the different waves of the COVID-19, and we have seen that more or less at this stage with the vaccination, also thanks to that, the vehicles capacity has been increased up to 80 or 100%, but we hope that this situation will always be maintained in the future. The second one layer that we tried to assess was the operation and organizational aspect, because it's clear that the COVID-19 pandemic has also brought some new or additional activities that had to be covered by public transport operators. So, for example, arrangement for practicing safe distancing between driver and passenger, or arrangements for airing out, cleaning, and disinfection of public transport vehicles. That clearly has an impact both on the operational aspect and the organizational aspect of these services. Third one is about the reduction of service level and frequency, because especially in the first wave, there has been a reduction on those services that when there was a low transport demand, also to try to recover the missing vehicles that were on the peak hour lines, because due to the reduced capacity, the operator had to increase the number of vehicles clearly that had to be implemented in that. And fortunately, after the first wave, all the operators were really actually tried to manage to restore all the services, although clearly this has an impact on also some kind of vulnerable users. And the fourth one was about funding and revenue issues. So first of all, due to the fall in the ridership, the operators had to face a massive reduction in terms of revenue from traffic and from passengers, and also to fix some additional costs to to all the pandemic procedures. But also there have been also some cost reduction, especially because there were some services that were suspended, but this cannot be considered to be a positive result. And I think, and we thought that at this stage it's still not clear whether all the different public transport and shared mobility operators has the possibility to recover all the losses or the revenue issues that they faced. But basically, thanks to a sort of increase in the number of passengers, the situation is not worse as in the previous time. So we then tried to focus to put a light on ICT enabling solution in COVID-19 scenarios. So we tried to see whether there were new ICT solutions that popped up during the pandemic to also face the safety and distance issues. And for this, we tried to also assess the opportunities tailored to different contexts. So small and medium towns for those extra urban services where there could be specific app to provide details to users on number of seats available, on small town urban transport, so stakeholders that need to control the demand to meet the capacity of the network and so forth. And also with a focus on the school transportation services. So there was an increase in the perception from parents to really ensure that their children travel safely. So again, there were some opportunities popped up in 2020 and early 2021 to, for example, allocate seats through the app to specific child door to see whether there could be some booking platform for this.
Andrea, 3 more minutes, please.
Okay, so I will immediately pass the floor to Maria that will say a few words about the policy responses to COVID-19.
Thanks, Andrea. The policy responses of CIVITAS destination sites were gathered and analyzed by the research team of the Renewable and Sustainable Energy Systems Lab of the Technical University of Crete. The steps followed for this analysis included thorough research, desk research actually, on the policy measures that have already adopted in other European territories and consider existing researches on this topic. This helps us to cluster different responses and to define the criteria for research at the destinations level. Based on those, a structured questionnaire was developed and distributed to the 6 cities representatives. And after the first analysis of the partners' feedback, as well as a number of field surveys at the site level, took MemEx and Vectos, as Andrea referred before, interviewed selected stakeholders to fit the analysis with further insights of experience and lessons learned from the cities. Each site also provided its self-assessment about the impact level that the applied policies and measures had on 4 main categories: transport, tourism, environment, and society. And also had a cross-site analysis to add the set of policy and resiliency planning recommendations. Next slide, please, Andrea. Thank you. So the policy responses were clustered under 5 groups. We had, first of all, the public transport related policies, mainly focused on operational restructures and safety measures for the bus operation, for the situation inside the bus, about the social distancing, the use of masks, and also the bus stations. Next slide, please. Thank you. Then we have the street and public space interventions to motivate biking and walking for daily transportation. That included temporary measures to promote the use of bicycle and walking, new or improved infrastructure for walking and cycling, and other measures generally. And next slide, please. Also measures to enforce share and micromobility, like improved services with frequent disinfection. And next slide. Policies accelerating e-governance and digitalization of services. Also soft measures for capacity building and tailored mobilized financial support. And our last one, and most important, thank you, the long-term planning for recovery and resiliency through cross-sector cooperation supporting cities to readjust with improved and upgraded environments. And considering that the tourism sector for our 6 islands accounts over the 50% of the gross domestic product, tourism-related responses were in the front line for the recovery planning, including safety and hygiene protocols, COVID-free labeling, and monetary measures, of course. The main results of this analysis and the key findings are included in the booklet that Andrea referred before, and that's from my side. Back to you, Andrea.
Yeah. So thanks, Maria, and that time is more or less up. So I will really just try to wrap up this presentation with a few concluding slides. The first one is that, as I said to you, there is a specific chapter on opportunities towards sustainable mobility, recovery, and enhancement. And we basically identified 2 possible pathways. One is what we call multi-stakeholder planning approach. And in this picture, we tried to design what could be the main intervention that could be developed into urban areas to foster, first of all, public transport and also active modes that, as said by Claudio, could be really promoted into touristic destinations. So from the development of dedicated bus line for public transport and also to the allocation of road space for people, but there are further details on our booklet. And the second one is what we call service and digital solution integration. And we really think that through integrating different shared mobility services within a common layer or common digital tool, this service could be really promoted and users could be well informed about that. But in parallel, we thought that municipalities should come back to a central role in public transport and collective services. And this is why the municipalities could have a central role both in the planning of the services, but also in the assessment of the KPI of the service. So to conclude, our booklet has 10 key recommendations that try to really summarize the situation for that. I will not enter into the details for that. You can have a look at them on the booklet, but maybe just to say that the European Commission has set this ambitious target for really reduce the carbon emission from transport by 2035 and by 2050. So I think that it's important to, first of all, consider the public transport, especially in touristic destinations, as the backbone of urban mobility, but secondly, to really integrate those active modes and shared mobility into the public transport network, so that there could be this kind of integrated planning approach, so that the user needs assessment and promotion of the dialogue between public and private transport operators. So that's it for my presentation. This booklet will be soon available, and you will also receive a specific PDF version on email, so that thanks for that you have registered. We have the possibility to share this immediately with you. So thanks for that, and I will pass the floor to Panos again.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And my turn, I pass immediately the floor to Ulf, that will discuss with us the experience and the impact of COVID-19 tourism, mostly in Germany, but I think that he will also have some general remarks and conclusions that apply to other countries.
Yes, thank you, Panos, and thank you for the invitation to be here. And with this last intervention, we will change a little bit the perspective. So we have been looking at the destination level so far, and now we're looking more at the markets where the tourists are coming from. And because our data is the best in Germany, because here we run our own survey, it's all survey-based data. It's a lot about volumes and behavior, so also about behavioral changes and the disruption of behavior during the COVID pandemic, but also like trying to get an outlook on what will be the future based on attitudes and interests of our German travelers. And this is where we are coming from. This is basically starting from the beginning of this year, where we were able to do a first stock taking of 2020, and also having the possibility to give an outlook on 2021 and the following years. And we are coming from a very stable market where we have been seeing 70 million holiday trips of Germans going either into Germany or abroad. and usually most of the trips went abroad. And this was very, very stable for a long, long time. And we've seen in 2020, the Germans still were traveling, so still 51 million holiday trips, but a minus of 30%. And we have seen, like here, the big disruption in the destinations. So it was only 50% or minus 50% for the travels abroad, and even a plus by volume, even though we had the lockdown and it was not possible to travel within Germany for some months. In the months where it was possible, we have seen actually people flooding the destinations within Germany. We're also able to take a closer look on the Mediterranean islands. It's not fully the same 6 as in the destinations project, but I think it quite fits the kind of patterns how people behave. And here we have seen exactly this minus 50% from 6.4 million in 2019 to 3.2 in 2019 to 3.2 in 2020. But then looking from, let's say, these bad news into the future, what we have seen is that, and we have did this really several times now during the pandemic, that every 2-3 months we asked about travel plans and travel confidence, and people really want to travel, and especially in Germany, but I think it's also true for most of the other European markets. The economic situation on the personal level was not affected that much, which is very important for the possible recovery. And we also see that the desire to travel is high, even sometimes higher than before the pandemic, and also the motivation and the interest on why to go on holiday and what to do on holiday. It has been stable, so they still want the same things as before the pandemic. And they want it even harder now that it is sometimes not available, so that they've seen it's something you cannot take for granted. So this is, from the demand side, an excellent base for, let's say, a quite fast recovery. Just this is to illustrate the disruption that we have been seeing. It's the mode of transport on these trips, on these holiday trips, and you see that you have some, let's say, quite not that dynamic developments in the last 10-20 years, with the rise still of the plane and a little bit decline of the car, and this has basically been turned upside down by the pandemic, and it will be interesting to see how this goes for the next years. This is just how to get to the holiday destinations. I will have later some slides on how people move within the holiday destination. And coming from this, just as a baseline, we are coming from 2019, what I've told you, 71 million trips, 2020, 51 million trips. This is what we have already measured. And we are, for 2021, also quite sure we'll probably end up, probably closer to 50 than to 55 million, because now the November and December have been bad again. But still, we have seen, as soon as travel is positive and as soon as the pandemic is not interfering so much, it's bouncing back very fastly. So there is really the possibility of a good recovery in 2022. This is a little bit given the fact if the pandemic is not so much in our way, at least not in Europe, let's say from Easter onwards. And there is a good chance also for 2023 and onwards that we see similar travel patterns and volumes as before the pandemic. And when we look at the break of destinations, we also will see for 21 the same as we have seen for 2020, that we have a high share of domestic. But also we saw the recovery in 2020 already, that some Mediterranean countries have already been recovered and already had in the summer some pre-COVID figures, like I think some of the Greek islands. We still see a high share of neighboring countries, but over the next 2 years, we expect that this will also go into a direction that we have been seeing before the crisis. What's a little bit doubtful is the long haul, so what's going outside of Europe, but I think this is not so interesting for the discussion today. So in general, it's a very optimistic picture. When we're seeing what the Germans want to do, we see that the higher vaccination rates, they seem also to make it possible, because the Germans had the same desires that they're having this year. They were telling us last year as well, but then the winter was basically a full stop, and now still we are hopeful with the vaccination that travel is possible. If we ask them, they want to travel as they have been traveling before. As I told you, the recovery is possible in the next years, and but the prerequisite that there are no further setbacks with the pandemic. And what's really destroying demand is quarantine rules and really the very high numbers of cases at the destination. Other restrictions like testing regimes or mask, having to wear the mask, that's
excusez-moi, c'est qui à l'appareil?
Okay, Panos, you can hear me well?
Just hello?
Yes?
Yeah. Ulf, please go on. We are.
I go on. Okay.
Well.
Funny.
Go ahead. Problem with Panos, so please go ahead.
No worries. I
we
go
are
on.
here. We are here. Very good.
So basically, quarantine and high numbers is what kills the demand. Everything else is basically okay for most people. And we've done similar research in these countries. So in the German-speaking countries, UK, Netherlands, Czech Republic, and Poland. And basically, we came to the same conclusions there. So people are eager to travel, and they want to travel again as soon as it's possible. And now, second part of the presentation is a little bit looking for the mobility in the destination and the sustainability. And here we have the figures for Germany again, where we see that looking at really hard figures where sustainability has been the decisive factor for choosing a specific offer, it's only 6% of the travelers who tell us that they did this. A further 22% at least consider sustainability when making that choice. And it's even less for the travelers to the Mediterranean island destinations. So it's not a big issue here, you can see. When we ask them if they are open and sympathetic towards sustainability, so do they want their holiday to be sustainable, we have even a majority already of people who tell us they either want it ecologically or socially sustainable, or like the harder one, they want it both. And here we also see similar figures if we look for the Mediterranean island travelers. So you see this attitude behavior gap. Huh? People want to be sustainable, they want their holiday to be sustainable, but they are not really behaving this way yet. And we also see on the other hand, and this is probably also something we have to pay a closer focus again when the pandemic is not more important, is the issue of flight shame. It's before the pandemic, and just asking people who have been flying if they are having a bad consciousness about this. And we see it's there. It's not like really a big feeling, but somehow it's there, and only 27% of the people who are flying, they are, let's say, they have zero shame. So considering this, and also considering how people tend to decide for their mode of transportation. So when they want to travel to Mediterranean islands, of course, they have to take the plane. But you know, they have a little bit of a bad feeling. They have like good reasons why they take the plane and how to decide for a specific trip. But here you can see again sustainability when deciding for the means of transport to go on a Mediterranean island is not a big issue. On the other hand, when they are in the destinations, they do some things that are quite sustainable. So they like to walk. They are walking much more than in other destinations. They are taking the bus, and this is very recent data from 2020. So even during the pandemic, they take the bus, at least for transfer. They take the rental car, taxi, public transport, bike, excursion boats, and this kind of stuff. And we are able to compare this to 2014. And this, what we see, matches quite well with what Alexandra said. So that we see also with the tourists that cycling and walking is really something that's going up. Interestingly, car rental is not going up. They don't seem to be too reluctant to use bus and public transport. So I think it's quite interesting, and I think this shows and also encourages us that this new normal that we now can define, and maybe define in a better way than before, this is something that really we could do. So there is the possibility from the customer sides to do this, to encourage them to use more sustainable means of transport in the destination. And also, when now seeing, this is the last slide for this, what they consider sustainable behavior when they travel to Mediterranean island destinations is exactly this. It's walking and cycling, it's waste avoidance, it's buying local, and it's using public transport. So they are there, and I mean, it's easy for them, it's not a big hassle. And if they want to do something sustainable, mobility is on their mind. So I think in general, people are not looking for sustainability offers, but they are open to it. So it's basically up to us, up to you to bring this to the tourists. And maybe right now what works best is this individual outside stuff. So it's by bike and foot. This is really safe, and this is something that works very well. But I also see that there is no really big and lasting reluctance to use public transport, at least once the pandemic is over. Now I think you have to take good care that you communicate in the right way. But I think this goes in total. So there is a need for good mobility offers. There is a need for good communication and good information about these offers. And as long as the pandemic is somewhere there in the vicinity, of course, it is important that the health issue is covered and also well communicated. Yeah, this was basically it. And now I'm giving back to Panos again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulf. Apologies for accidentally unmuting my microphone in the middle of a phone call. I think that we had 3 excellent presentations, very informative, presenting all kinds of aspects of the impact of COVID on transport, the impact on sustainability, on choosing more sustainable modes. We have now another 8 minutes, and I'm happy to initiate discussion or receive questions from our audience. We still have about 30 people attending, and this is very good news because from the beginning we had about the same number of people attending. If you are still with us, by all means, from what you heard, please tell us, share with us some of your thoughts, share with us some of your questions, and we will try to address them. Maybe I should make a start, and then if there are no other members of the audience that have questions, I would like to, if you allow me, as a moderator of this webinar, I would like to come back to this point that was raised by Alexandra and by Ulf. You called something as a new normal. I would invite the other panelists to join us and turn on their microphones and their cameras. Thank you. And basically, I want to go a little bit deeper into this notion of new normal, because it is so important for us and for our audience to understand, in my mind, 2 things. The first one is, if we can be a little more precise of what we mean. And the second point that comes to mind is how sustainable this new normal is over the long term. Is this something temporary because of the difficult days we live, because of the pandemic, because of COVID, and because of the appearance of a new variant now that we don't know what it means for the winter months? Or it is a new frame of mind, if I can put it this way, that can outlast the pandemic. So please, by all means, come in and help me the non-technician understand a little better that role of the new normal. Yes, Wolf, go ahead, please.
Yeah, maybe from the demand side first, and a little bit linking it to the presentation. What we really see is the new normal in really in the rough figures, like KPIs of travel. So how many people will travel out of Germany? Where will they travel? What will they do on holidays in terms of type of holiday? We see the new normal will pretty much be the old normal. So we are looking probably at the same numbers. We are probably looking at the same share of holidays in the Mediterranean, the same shares of sun and beach. So there we don't see really, we see the disruption now, but once the disruption is over, it's really likely to bounce back pretty fast. But where we see the possibility for the new normal is then how they behave in the destination and also their set of mind. And I think there, also because of what happens in the society, we really see that sustainability is now a topic, climate change is now a topic, but still the yearning to southern destinations is there. So we think people will travel to, keep traveling to the Mediterranean. They will travel by a plane. They will have a bad consciousness, which probably brings them to the point that they are looking more, how can they behave more sustainably in the destination. And then if the offer is there, it's not very on the first level of this decision making, but when the offer is there, when the information is there, I think they are really, yeah, you basically, you just have to pick them and guide them to smart sustainability offers, be it in mobility, but I think also in other kinds like buying local, supporting the local economies. I think this is where the mindset is taking place, and where now I think in the destinations there is maybe a possibility to be proactive and inspire the future tourists.
Well, there are two other aspects to it. Maybe I can address the behavioral aspect to Alexandra and the policy aspect to Maria very briefly. Alexandra?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Ulf. But it's also from the other side, I'd say it's also a lot about habits. So during COVID and other sort of life change moments, everyone has this sort of blank slate or window of opportunity appears where people can't just live on autopilot anymore. They have to start rethinking about their behaviors. Instead of just getting up in the morning and getting in the car, they go, ooh, how else? They have to come up with these new ways to travel. And if these become habits, if they can be facilitated long after the externality is gone, if the right measures and support is in place. So people have started cycling to work, for example, because they didn't want to be in a crowded train. And if they may have really enjoyed that behavior, and if the right measures are put in place and they receive the right support, they can continue to enjoy that and may well continue that behavior on. So I think it's really important to capitalize on those shifts that people, they're not just living the autopilot anymore. I think it's super important to focus on that.
Okay. Maria, from the point of view of policy, in terms of, what do our policymakers, our politicians, the community, the cities can do to make this new normal last longer and go in the right direction in terms of sustainability?
Actually, I really agree with Alexandra, because we have the opportunity, we have the chance to see another perspective, and through the policies we had the opportunity to implement it. For instance, in Rethno we had the opportunity to, in Greece generally, some policies adopted were about to enforce the use of bicycle. We measured that during the COVID, about 40% of the users were the road transport users were with their bicycles. That means if we offer the right policies and if we build on them, we can preserve these changes and there are some policies that offshore, of course, they will be not remain that in the part of social distancing and the use of masks. That's especially in public transport, but this is very clear. But in other words, some policies referring to enforce the sustainable mobility modes are really important to remain and to push them.
Yeah, let me just read to you a comment made by one of our attendees from the UK. It says, it is interesting that German colleagues are so optimistic about the rapid recovery from COVID. In the UK, we fear a significant long-term reduction in inbound international visitors from Europe, and more specifically in Hastings, in pre-pandemic times, international travel visitors accounted for 23% of all visitors. We fear this may take many years to recover at that level. Thank you for your comment. It is indeed, in my mind also, as I also have family in the UK, quite interesting to see the differences from country to country. And I believe this is also, if I may say so, due to the measures imposed on visitors from country to country. If within the European Union, we can travel, if we are vaccinated, to visit the UK, international travelers need to take a COVID test before departure and a COVID test on day 2. And that makes international travelers going to the UK or to the US or to Canada, to other countries that have similar measures, quite more complicated. So I think that at this point, I would like to also ask Andrea if you have any comments, and Claudio before we close this session. Welcome to say a few words.
Yeah. Thanks. I would all agree with what was previously said by Ulf, Alexander, and Maria. Very good comments. I will just add that in terms of new normal, I think we have to recognize that the progressive good trends that we had model shared towards sustainable mobility transport have been halted by the COVID, because people now have a feeling of uncertainty in sharing trips with others, and also because there has been an increased use of private cars. So we will need to spend many effort to really come back to the previous level of COVID with public transport especially, but also to increase that level, because we cannot deem that all the touristic and mobility demand will be covered by e-scooter sharing or bike sharing and so forth. So in terms of this, I think enabling factors for change in terms of the transport mode to use, I would agree with Hoof that now there are different categories such as price, affordability, efficiency, and so forth, and these need to be increased for those that are sustainable means of transport. So that's why we need to have affordable transport service so that people can find them more convenient. And also we now add another layer, that is the safety issue, because now people want to be safe in sharing trips with other on a bus, on a car sharing, or on another. So I would say that this could be really could be the enabling factor for change. I mean, to start providing an integrated multimodal transport offer where people could really take their decision. I want to travel by bus or by bike, or just take a walking and so forth. But the sustainability is clearly now is a low rank, and hopefully will need to be increased in the next new normal. If we just do, and then I stop my introduction, but just if we think about e-commerce, now it's great that everyone wants to really shop online and to have a delivery in real time, more or less in one day. But I think that in the next future, we will need to see whether this is sustainable or not. Is it sustainable that I order a package or a good and it arrives to my home in just one day? Maybe also these need to be changed a bit, and as well for mobility. And now everyone has the freedom to travel with their car if they wish, but in the next future, probably hopefully there will be a changing into this behavior.
Okay, we have a number of other questions that are coming from the audience. I think that maybe one that can be addressed to Claudio as a public transport operator is whether the new waves of epidemic will reduce again the use of public transport in favor of private car, or for tourists in favor of hiring a car as opposed to using public transport. The other question that I have is, will local ferries have more potential after COVID, more air than a bus, more attractive, etc.? In other words, if you want to go from point A to point B, you can go by bus or by ferry. By ferry, you go on the deck and you are in open air. I don't know, Claudio, if you can address this. There are more questions coming. There have been any work done with tour companies regarding the need to reduce car use, more sustainable use of green options? I think we have addressed that in our analysis during the Destinations project. Claudio, if you can address some of these questions before.
Yeah, no, all this question raises the complexity of the topic and the challenge we had during the project to manage different stakeholders from different markets, no? But try to make a synthesis of the different intervention of speakers and questions. I would like to make the approach in 3 blocks, no? So one block is the demand, the other is the offer, and the third is the regulation and the market control. So from the demand side, Wolf make a very clear picture of the hope of German markets that I believe is, despite the UK reluctancy, but it is a general wave. So we see here in Madeira, so tourists are, so there is a positive approach regarding the vacancies, the next vacancies, and the actual tourism. So I'm very happy to see that the demand is already quite aligned with our objectives, so which are coming back to my horizontal integration. So we have transport and we have other touristic services like restaurants, like shops, local shops. So if we can include mobility option as a fil rouge that pass through all these in some theoretically way, we can join different economies and touch the spot of the needs of the tourist, no? That what local economy, then what sustainable transport, that to be sustainable, have sustainable attitude as destination. The other aspect I touch very well for me, Andrea, regarding the offer. So public transport operator, sharing mobility operator had to completely change their approach. So they are not small changes. Big changes has to be faced. Protection measure, change in planning, because we have to reduce the occupation of our buses. So this is an earthquake. No, we cannot make that this is normal, and these affect costs, but they bring us a lot of opportunities. And this is the question maybe for a next project. So maybe we should find a way, as Ulf very well explained, to touch in the right way at the right moment the tourists, to explain that we are really safe, that we are really integrated, that we are part of a solution. So this is what we miss at this stage. Maybe technologies, maybe mass. So there is a
Claudio, I mean, there is a last, probably, given we are running over our time, a last important question that has been coming to me from our audience, and says, how many of all of these wonderful pilot projects that we were running during the CIVITAS Destinations project will be able to continue after the end of the project? Are there projects able to run independently from local administrations without EC support? Are local administrations prepared with enough resources to keep improving and expanding these kind of projects that have produced such good results? So this is a question that perhaps I can answer from all of us, because I know effectively that many of the initiatives, many of the projects do continue and will continue into the future. Whether they will be covered by another EC funded project or will continue running under local funding or will attract more private funding, because as Claudio said, we were able to attract significant amounts of private funding outside and in addition over and above the EU support in this project. It remains to be seen, but we do know that many of the municipal authorities on the 6 islands that participated in the project, they had a very positive attitude to continue the good work that we started, and we are very optimistic that this will continue in the future, producing better results, guiding us to more sustainable solutions, mobility solutions within not only our 6 island destinations, but also all across Europe. So on this note, I think that I would like to extend a word of appreciation, first of all, for MemEx and Eleonora Ercoli that organized all this, to our panelists and speakers, Claudio, Andrea, Alexandra, Maria, and Ulf. And I encourage all of us to have more of these webinars, because I think that they attract interest, as we see from our audience, and they continue the debate of how to proceed, how to look forward. Thank you all very much. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Panos.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.